We start with an attempt to cheer up Australians living in Britain who are depressed about losing the Ashes.
A shining and a beauteous hand reached forth out of the glowing cauldron of creation and the swirling mists of time. Whose hand indeed? The legends of old, confirmed by recent scientific breakthroughs, incontrovertibly prove that the hand, the shining and the glorious hand, was the hand of a great Dame! Dame Nature herself!
Dame Edna Everage delivering part of the oratorio The Song of Australia, written by Barry Humphries to a score by Carl Davies. It was first performed in Britain in 1981 as part of a concert called Last Night of the Poms, a neat piece of antipodean wordplay on a celebrated BBC series of classical music events. And as this year's Proms reach their final night this weekend, they'll be closely followed into London's Royal Albert Hall by the return of Poms, staged here for the first time in 28 years at the start of a UK tour. Sir Les Patterson, Australian cultural attaché to the Court of St James, also appears in the show, although sticks to his rule of never sharing a stage with Dame Edna. When Carl Davies and Barry Humphries came into a front row studio to discuss the return of Last Night of the Poms, I asked Humphries to what extent he'd rewritten the concert to reflect Australian history over the last 3 decades.
Well, it's extraordinarily topical, this show. After all, it is a musical history of Australia. And so the changes that have taken place are only in the last 28 years, which is when we first did it. We did it in London, Carl, didn't we? How many shows did we do here?
We did 2 packed performances at the Albert Hall, yes. And it was a big gamble, really, for the two of us in one way, because we actually wrote a concert. From beginning to end. We didn't start with a well-known overture. We became a well-known overture because it had a lot of famous Australian themes in it, and so on. Each Peter and the Shock, the Song of Australia, these were all brand new, and Barry and I created them especially to present this sort of great evening of Australian culture.
Yes, and I suppose it's more topical than the Messiah.
Dame Edna is not in the room at the moment, so you can be entirely frank. I mean, do either of you ever get sick of her?
Well, I've known her for a very long time, and there are times when I get exasperated, but I never really get sick of her, because sometimes she amuses me against my better judgment. She says things that I've thought of saying, but wouldn't particularly dare to say in public. And she sings better than I do, and of course she has much better legs. I wouldn't expose my legs to the extent that she does, but I think she's going to be wearing some very attractive frocks in this performance. One of the problems with Edna, of course, is that she rather objects to Les Patterson being on the bill. Les Patterson being the rather disreputable, indeed, to use a word not enough used on the BBC, scrofulous Australian diplomat, given to habits of...
Barry, there's somebody outside who's desperate to come in. My God, it's Sir Les! Come in, Les.
I'm here.
I just want to explain, Sir Les, that this is a BBC...
Hello, viewers. Hello, viewers.
Listeners, strictly, but you...
No. Now, listen. You're Mark. And I like that little show of yours. Front row, is it?
That's right.
I always sit in the front row, particularly when it's one of the clubs to which I belong, and the ladies take a fancy to me. I'm not averse to a little lap dancing, which is one of the advantages of the front row, and I can see the nerves on Mark's organism now, because he's frightened that I'm going to say something uncalled for, which I am not. I'm very conscious that this is a family radio show.
It is a difficult time for the BBC because there's this issue of compliance since... I don't know if you
Compliance? No, tell me what's that about, Mark?
Since Jonathan Ross and Russell Brand said things they should not have said on the radio.
Well, you make the
you're not allowed to say anything
You
anymore.
make the mistake of having people from the wrong side of the tracks on your shows. But I can assure you I come from a very, very respectable Roman Catholic background in Sydney. And my ancestors were sent to Australia. They didn't actually go voluntarily, but they were very glad when they got there, I can tell you. And I'm glad, too, to be working with Carl Davies and Dame Edna in this show, because I'm going to be in the first half. Edna doesn't talk to me, Mark, because she thinks, well, she's a bit of a, what we call in Australia, a wowser. That's a Puritan. She doesn't like strong drink.
Oh, there is someone else.
What?
So, Les, there's someone else who's
I can see her. It's Edna. I'm not. Sorry, I'm getting out of here. Look, sorry, I'll tell you more later. I'm going out the other door of the studio because Edna will... I'm sorry, there'll be a scene.
All right, we'll just give you a moment to...
Thank you. You tell them something
I'll tell
more.
them something.
I'll talk to him.
Yeah,
Carl,
okay.
dealing with all these egos in the show, it must be quite difficult, is it, Carl?
Well, it isn't really, because I am so entertained by them. But the other thing is, I would say, being with Edna and Soles is a lesson in performing. I learnt a great deal from...
Hello, Carl. What are you talking about?
Oh,
You
it's
must be the compere of this programme. Is it Mark? Mark
It is-
Lawson.
it is Dame Edna.
Hello, Mark. It's lovely to be in a BBC studio, but there's a horrible smell in the studio. Have you had someone else in here? Someone unsavoury?
Can I ask you some important questions being discussed at the moment, Dame Edna? The Daily Mail, one of our popular newspapers here, has been discussing whether celebrities should use Botox or not. Anne Robinson, the television presenter, has been under pressure for allegedly having too much cosmetic surgery. Is this something that in your 50 years now as a megastar, have you considered having help?
I haven't. I'm very, very lucky, Mark, in that I have a beautiful skin. I was recently selected by an international cosmetic company to advertise one of their beautiful products. Because my skin, I notice you're touching it tentatively, but you... It's funny being on the wireless and being at the same time tastefully fondled. However, I have lovely skin. Well, I'm too young looking for my age because I'm a mature woman. I'm approaching 60. React.
50 years in show business, so you were
I'm
on stage at the age of
approaching
10.
60 from the wrong direction, Mark. That's what I was leading up to. You obviously have never worked with a megastar before.
I find it difficult.
I set things up and you let them down. You drop them in a hole. Listeners, this man is delightful and he's wearing a lovely suit. Not wearing a tie, as I notice is the fashion these days. However, where were we?
We were talking about...
cosmetic surgery. I have beautiful skin, but I had a few crow's feet added. I said to a cosmetic surgeon in Brazil, as a matter of fact, where I was at the time, having a little wax, I said, give me some crow's feet, and he put them in because I just looked far too young. I'm the only celebrity who's had cosmetic surgery to age them. I also, see that double chin? You can touch it. That's artificially added. My doctors, I said I must have a double chin because my bone structure's too beautiful. He delved into his deep freeze and he found a little strip of flesh. It looked like a chicken breast or a schnitzel that hasn't been crumbed. And he sewed it on. It absolutely took. A few days later, it was part of me. And I said, well, you were very clever to find that little double chin for me. I said, what was it originally? He said, it's an offcut. It was an offcut from Elizabeth Taylor. It was her left love handle. And if you look, oh, listeners, if only you could, you'll see that little indentation, Mark? That was caused by Richard Burton's fingernails. Isn't that extraordinary?
That is extraordinary. There is a quite sensitive question I have to ask you, Dame Edna, which is that over the years your relationship with your manager, Barry Humphries, has got quite tense. There was a South Bank show with Melvyn Bragg in which you spoke quite bitterly about each other. Does that continue to be a problem?
Yes, I saw him loitering. Was he in the studio a bit earlier?
He was.
Yes, well, the fact of the matter is, I found that he had his hand in the till. He's had a percentage of my income for many, many years. I've taken it to a lawyer, and I said, what am I going to do about Barry Humphries? Because I cannot go on being bled. This man is a leech, and he hasn't had a career himself. That's the saddest thing of all, Mark.
Finally, Dame Edna, would you ever consider retiring? For example, Barbara Streisand, I think, has retired 3 or 4 times now. Frank Sinatra did 5 or 6 times. Is it something you've ever contemplated?
No, I won't retire because the public want me. There is a big need for me. When I step onto the stage of the Alfred Hall, which is exactly on the place where King Alfred burnt the cakes, did you know that? The fact of the matter is that I wouldn't retire because there's been a poll, and apparently I'm not just a star. I'm not just a lovely person. I'm not just the most famous Australian on the planet. I'm a vitamin. I'm vitamin E. And when I'm not around, people suffer from EDS, which is Edna Deprivation Syndrome. And I'm setting that right, not just at the Royal Alfred Hall, but when I go to Bournemouth and Birmingham. Have you heard of that?
I have heard of those.
Birmingham, Bournemouth, and
Liverpool, you're
Liverpool, even up to Liverpool.
You'd completely forgotten Liverpool, haven't you, Dame Edna?
I had, and so had the world. But it's coming back. It's in fashion again, Possums.
Dame Edna Everage also contributing to that report were Sir Les Patterson, Barry Humphries and Carl Davies. Last night at the Poms is at the Royal Albert Hall in London next Tuesday before going on, as Dame Edna said, to Brighton, Birmingham, Bournemouth and Liverpool.